Well, Jim, welcome to the program and thanks so much for joining us. I know it must be a hectic time for you. I mean, just personally, how did you come through this cyclone event?
We had a lot of water around, but thank goodness we had no damage on our place at all. We had no slips, nothing. So it's quite patchy how it's come through. There's quite big areas that are hit and there's quite big areas that had no damage. So we're just thankful that we got away light.
I was reading of one farmer yesterday talking about he's just replaced 7 kilometres of fencing, and he says it'll probably cost him $100,000, and I imagine that is more common than not.
Yeah, no, on the places that have been hit hard, there's slips that have gone through fences. The one that you're talking about, the rivers came up and took away all of our nice riparian fences and plantings. A lot of them aren't there anymore. So there's two sorts of fence damage and damages. You're slipping and then the river stems doing their thing.
How is the recovery going? I mean, everything's probably dried out now, I suppose. Does that make life a bit easier?
It took a long time because for the first 2 weeks afterwards, each week we got another 100 mils of rain. So it took sort of 3 weeks before a lot of people could get many places at all on their farms. But there's a whole range. Some people have just about finished the recovery because they didn't have that extensive damage and were able to get fencing crews and diggers in straight away. So that's, months or 5 or 6 weeks now. But some people have hardly started because they've hardly been able to get out on and do much on the place, or not been able to get the contractors in to do the job.
I assume you've got to get rid of the silt. Was that the first task? Even now, and this stuff would be like concrete now if it's dried out a bit. Would that be right?
There's a whole range. You can get the silt. There's some silt that's quite shallow, which might only be 50 mils, which some of that's got to be worked into the ground. There's a whole different many ways of handling silt, and then there's sandy silt, and there's silty silt, and there's clay silt, then there's gravel. So you've got a whole range of things which different people are dealing with, and it's some of the silt is up to 1/2 metre deep or more. Some of that we're not sure yet how people have got to look at how to handle it, because it comes down to cost effectiveness and the ability to shift it and get into the real dirt.
Is there much stock that's sort of gone missing? I don't mean necessarily swept away in the floodwater, but without fencing, stock will just wander, won't they? Has that been an issue as well, or has that managed to be sort of sorted?
There are stock missing off farms because of fences. There has been stock caught in slips and washed away in areas, but yeah, there's still stock that's not back where it should be. Some of the deer farms especially, they're the harder ones to try and control and keep. They'll go into bush and disappear a lot quicker than a sheep or a beef animal. So yeah, people haven't got all their stock back, and that's where osprey for cattle, they can do wanding to if you've got strange stock turned up, because they might have gone for kilometres just about, because some farms, there's one after the other have got no fences, so they can help with identifying where they belong.
So what are you actually doing now as Federated Farmers? I know you've got the Farming Army sorted, and it's come back into gear, and I'm sure highly motivated. And what else is Feds? I mean, obviously you'll be taking lots of phone calls and things each day. What are you able to do?
Yeah, well, we're working initially on ground here. We've got working with our rural advisory group, the RAG group in Hawke's Bay, which has beef and lamb, dairy NZ, the councils, independents, vets and insurance companies, bankers. So you've got the whole group that are working with farmers. So we're sort of trying to do it as an overall level. The Rural Support Trust is in there as well. So we're trying to help things happen. We're not actually out there putting in post holes or putting in post, but we're trying to make it behind the scene. Then Federated Farmers in Wellington are working with government departments to try and lessen red tape. Like we've just got a bill through Parliament, which we asked for, was an emergency bill to try and, so putting in culverts, replacing culverts, dams, those sorts of things. Normally you'd have to get a consent, but we've got the bill through Parliament that you don't need a consent. They're still working on that, trying to make sure it's truly practical, but the government has been working well with that with us.
Yeah, I understand burning off as an example, getting rid of slash and stuff and rubbish is probably the only practical way is to burn it off, which is against the rules in many parts, but I think they're trying to get that lifted as well.
Yeah, trying to. That hasn't come through in the first tranche of the bill and what it can do. That's what we're aiming for in the future, because the horticulturists as well as the farmers, they're riparian fence, so you've got all your riparian planting mixed up with wire, mixed up with broken posts or battens. Trying to separate it is physically impossible. And the orchardists have got the same, where their whole orchard's been wiped out of the ground. So you've got the trees the irrigation pipe, the reflective net underneath, or grapes, netting on grapes. It's just absolute tangle with shelter belt trees, the whole lot. And it's just physically impossible to separate it. So that's what the orchardists and farmers have said they would like to be able to do, is make sure it's done properly and get a really good hot fire. And that's the most practical way to get rid of some of that.